Weather Station are a Canadian band who I had not been too familiar with up until this album, but I've got to say I am intrigued to check out their previous stuff, their earlier work based on this release, because I'm rather fond of this. I must say I'm seeing a bit of a mixed response to it so far. I mean, I'm seeing some people that are finding it a bit dull, a bit unimaginative, not particularly very stand out, but then I'm seeing an opposite side to this album that people are completely adoring it and head over heels for it, and I've got to say I'm closer to the latter than anything else. I'm not really mad at whatever you personally think of this album. Obviously it's subjective, that's fine, but I personally am having a great time with this at the moment. I think the Weather Station have provided a really well produced, lovely listen here. There's such a lavishness to all of these tracks. There is not one moment that feels like the care behind the production or anything like that slipped away and, you know, there was some complacency on a particular track. There's never a moment like that for me. I feel like everything that's gone into this album is filled with so much heart and a real clear attention to detail when it comes to the craft of how well produced a song can be. I'm very sure that the people working on this album have a huge amount of appreciation for 60s singer-songwriters who, you know, back their music with really lavish Baroque pop instrumental. I'm sure they have an appreciation for Sophisti-Pop, chamber pop, if I haven't already said that. Just all kinds of genres coming together to create a really smooth listen. There's a vocal jazz style to this singer here, Tamara. The opening track really shines through with that style of singing. I think the vocals are very restrained, but they also work so well with the instrumentals that even if she can sometimes fade a little bit, she's not exactly doing anything particularly wrong. She can come through with some really catchy melodies considering how restrained and pulled back a lot of the time she is, which I find to be pretty remarkable, because there's often singers, songwriters I come across on this channel and I'll say, oh, their vocals just aren't really doing anything for me, they're not particularly very expressive, and yet what Tamara does here for the Weather Station works perfectly. It doesn't need Christina Aguilera coming through on every track with a it's not an album that needs the most electrifying performances. It needs performances like this to let the instrumentals just shine through, man. Ooh, the rich instrumental to Try to Tell You is fantastic, and I love the vocals working alongside this too. It's just such a well-crafted song. She's got the overwrought, emotionally affected vocals that you'd expect from a Sharon Van Etten song, particularly something from her 2014 album Are We There, which I'm still a huge fan of, by the way, and it's got that kind of contemporary folk sound running through it on this particular track and across many other tracks too. Parking Lot is another highlight, man. Once again, the production here is stellar. It's so catchy and yet it's so I don't know how to say it, it's so classy at the same time. Like there's not, you know, a really in-your-face beat or like a dance instrumental going on here, but the melody is so instantaneous. The last minute or so, maybe less than a minute actually, of this track is fantastic as well. Love the way the instrumental is just given room to breathe and just takes over the track. Reminds me of some old like Camera Obscura, some tracks of their early days, like, you know, Hey Lloyd, I'm Ready to Be Heartbroken, tracks like that where the instrumental just takes up such a chunk of the song, but it sounds so great that you don't necessarily have any qualms with it. And just to round things off with this little section of the album, that track run from 1 to 4 is so brilliant. Like the opening track, Robber, sets things up so well. The repetition of the word robber I think works really well, just makes it so memorable and easy to recognize straight away every time it comes on. It's a song that I feel like I've known for years, and yet I can't explain why I feel like I've known it for years, because it's just so homely and welcoming. Perhaps it's because it's familiar in its sound, you know, like as much as I really like this album, it isn't exactly always reinventing the wheel or reinventing the style of music that it's, you know, pulling from, but the fact that it is just such a track that I can just sing off the cuff at any point means a lot more to me than someone coming through with the most original album you've ever came up with. That's what music's about at the end of the day. The wiseness to the vocals really adds to this as well. She just sounds so professional in the way that she delivers her voice, and because of how much it's impacting me, I mean, I think it sounds great. So that is really what matters to me. There are some tracks that slow down a little bit. Trust is much more stripped back. It's definitely the ballad of the album. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I definitely think it's the weakest track, mostly just because I'm not exactly enamored by much of what's going on compared to some of the other moments. I think it's great lyrically though, really capturing that loss of trust in someone. The line, "This is the end of trust," is quite powerful, really. I mean, just completely closes things off between you and someone else. And although it's pretty straightforward in what it means, I think it holds a lot of weight to it. And with her vocals continually being restrained across this album, I think it probably needed a bit more of a power coming behind it. She probably should have just let loose and let rip a bit with her voice on this track to really make it completely work at its best. It could have really sold it, but I just don't know if it entirely does. The track Lost though, I think works a little bit better because it starts off a bit slower and a bit more pulled back in terms of the instrumental, but then it builds, and by the end of the track it hits such a fantastic climax. The piano here is fantastic as well. Absolutely adore the way it sounds here with the melody. Oh, it's so great. And then the last little leg of the track where she's saying in loss over and over again. I can't stop picturing the scene in Arrested Development with Lucille too, where she's like, "It says loss." At this point in the album as well, I was starting to realise, I don't know why I just did that her voice reminds me of another modern singer that pulls from like the 60s and other genres from the past in a way that does it in such a tasteful way that makes the song sound so great and the vocals work really well. And that's Wise Blood with the Titanic Rising album. I'm not sure if anyone else caught that comparison listening to this, but I don't know, I think it holds true. They both end up doing a similar thing and making what they do really work, even if they are pulling from other eras and might not be doing the most original thing in the world or anything like that, but whatever they're doing works really well. The track Where continues the absolute wet dream I'm having with this album. Honestly, man, anyone that loves production and just a really smooth sounding song is gonna cream over this thing, man. Oh my god. And the closing track too has a much more classic sophisticated pop sound. It's a really nice groove to it as well. Many of these tracks do. Yeah, everything I've said basically applies to so many other tracks on this album. I just think it's a great listen. I have a really good time with it every time I put it on. A nice surprise too, because like I said, hadn't heard much from these guys prior to this one, so to check out a new album from them and find it to be absolutely great is a nice surprise. This is an easy 8 out of 10 from me. Definitely going to be one of my favorites of the year. I think it's a great listen and I hope people enjoy it as much as I do too. It really just appeals to my general tastes, this kind of music. If it's produced as well as this, I just don't see how it can go wrong, and this is a great example of that. I do hope people like it as much as I do as well, but if you don't, or you do, whatever you feel about this album, let me know in the comments. That would be fantastic. Thank you for watching this review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have a good day. Subscribe if you have not already, and goodbye.